I understand that in many parts of the world, having a degree is still extremely important, and I expect that will remain for the foreseeable future. But again, it's the way how you play with the fringes of these developments that I think will make life extremely interesting for people.
Cast your mind back to when you were younger. How did you want to change the world? What skills and opportunities do you wish you had to succeed? And now, fast forward to today. Do you believe young people have these skills and opportunities? In Youth We Trust sits down with successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, educators, and others from around the world. We spotlight how individuals and organisations are shaping a better world, directly or indirectly, for the coming generations, through their focus on sustainability, equity, education, and more, to empower young people to create the future they deserve. And now, in Youth We Trust.
In today's episode of In Youth We Trust, I talk to Dr. Christiane Mueck, someone who thrives out of her comfort zone. An education economist by training, she spent over a decade in the Middle East on topics of youth development, higher education, and also sustainability, but also as an award-winning film producer and organizer of major music concerts, a key passion of hers. Christiane is a big thinker, worth listening to. Hi, Christiane. It's so lovely to have you on the podcast In Youth We Trust.
It's my pleasure, Prashant. It's great to be here.
In 7 different countries, you've actually been involved in each of these issues, actually at a significant level of depth. So welcome again. And let's dive straight into it. So as you know, Christiane, Lumi is about getting young people involved in solving the greatest problems that either businesses or society is facing, but through that building their skills for their own future. Now, we do that through quests, right? So if I take you back to your younger self, what is that quest that you would have loved to be on?
Interesting. I mean, I would say I'm still on a quest.
Well, aren't we all? But, was there an issue in particular that, bothered you or were you very passionate about as youth?
I think I have always been looking at things maybe a little bit differently, more systemically than other people around me. And so I think from the time I was a teenager, I think I was always thinking in terms of optionalities and potentialities. And I think to this day I'm someone who always goes into multiple different directions at once, trying to figure out not only what they're about but also what connects them. And I would say even as a young person, again today I would call that education, skill building, mindset building, and so on. But to be honest, I don't think that 30 years ago I had that vocabulary. I called it very often, influencing or messing with people's lives, but in a productive way.
That's right. Give me an example of what you were doing.
So one thing I did during my teenage years was some youth work during vacation, but always with a work component. I spent a summer in France preparing a music festival with a very international group of people. And, all my friends in Germany said, "Are you crazy? Like, this is actual work. Why are you doing this in the summer?" But I enjoyed it a lot. It was a group of other youth from across Europe, some of them quite a bit older than me. And, just to use opportunities like that to gain perspective, to then bring that back into my life. And then, after that summer, a lot of people told me, "Oh, you've changed." I'm like, "Yeah, but isn't that interesting?"
Yeah. I mean, so basically real world involvement in projects, kind of taking the initiative to do that, but not being shy of diving deep into something where you were accountable. How did you feel like when you were involved in the music festival as a woman or as a young person in general?
I mean, so I think what this has taught me and what it made me feel at that point in time was that, there are many different ways to live a life and to live an interesting and a successful life. So, I come up from a family of civil servants. My dad is a teacher. My grandpa was a teacher. My other grandpa was a policeman. So, it's a very settled, middle of the road German life. But at the same time, there are always these interesting things at the edges that are worth exploring. And, for example, my family wasn't wealthy, so I couldn't do what I may have wanted to do, which is spend a year studying abroad in high school, going to US, to UK, or somewhere else. But then like working in France and working in youth camps and so on. So, it's a question of finding these challenges, finding these experiences, and then doing something with them. And I found that very productive. I mean, I remember when I was in my final year in high school, I started applying to universities, but also to vocational training. And all my teachers told me, "Oh, you're crazy. You're very good students. Of course, you're going to go to university." But I really wanted to try out and see, how is it to have an employment interview? How is it to, run some tests that are, not high school level, but actually professional level for people who would go out and learn a trade or a profession at age 18. And, ultimately, then I went back to where I knew I would probably always end up, which was university. But I always felt I had made some experiences there that were extremely, extremely helpful. And to be open to that, I think is a strength, but it's also something that, depending on your environment, you have a bit of explaining to do.
Yeah, I mean, tell me a little bit about this. You've said it twice that either your friends or the people around you said you were crazy. So why is it that they found the whole notion of you kind of going out and doing vocational training, taking responsibility in a music festival crazy?
I think, if you're people look at you and they get an impression of what you're about, usually pretty quickly. And they might be right, they might be wrong, but to be honest, I mean, until today, I would say the guiding theme in my life that is that I look at different options of how to do things. And I think I've become a bit more structured around that in terms of looking at who are good people to work with, who are good, what are good topics to work on, where do I want to work, and so on and so on. Even if you then go back and do exactly what everyone predicted you would do from the start, it gives you a bit of breadth, of wingspan, of depth, and ultimately a lot of resilience to maybe then also deal with situations that where things don't go exactly your way.
Look, there are multiple interesting points that you've raised. Let me pick up on two of them. The first is without actually realizing what structures would some of your experiences fall into, you were picking up one very crucial skill, and that was people skills, right? Understanding who are the people that you can work with, how to work with different people because you are in unfamiliar settings,
Yes.
right? That was one point that I picked up, which actually is a huge skill to have. Um, the second was resilience, and this is a word that is used so often these days, possibly because a large part of the next coming generation doesn't really have ways and means to acquire it.
Yes.
I mean, there's one part which is like that, and then there's the other part which actually is only building resilience because they are living their lives in such difficult circumstances. So, do you think, like, let's look at the education system today? Do you think that you know young people have the opportunity to develop that wingspan? It's hard, or is it not? Or maybe I'm biased.
It's hard, but I would say compared to when I was a young person, there are many more opportunities today. So a lot of
Okay.
things that back then were maybe less usual have become mainstream today. From getting practical work experience, starting your own startup while you're in university or even in high school, um, getting exposure to, as you mentioned earlier, different people's skills, right? School counselors, career coaches, all of these
Yeah.
kinds of things. So there's a lot more offering there today. I think what's important is that unless you come from a background that already values all of these interventions, if you want, you find someone who lowers the hurdle for you and maybe takes you by the hand and makes sure that you get to experience this. Now, whether you then like it, whether you make it part of your toolbox, whether you are aiming to get to a point where you can actually teach this to others, that's a different question, right? But I think that's something very important, that you create an environment that invites this experimentation and goes away a little bit from the it's a straight path, and this is also where I think that the way how we communicate our successes, our life stories on social media is not helping, right? Because, and it's changing a little bit. It depends on where you're present. I'm quite frequently on LinkedIn, and I do appreciate that there are a lot of people now who are telling stories that are not about their successes, but also about their learning experiences, their struggles.
That is so true. So I think again there are layers to what you're saying. I think first of all there are more opportunities for people. That's for sure. But at the same time, I think there is these young people, as one of our other guests was also pointing to. Uh, they can learn a lot from the trajectories that people like you and I and many others have had. Doesn't matter. Who you are and what you're doing, the journey matters. And I think what it actually allows these young people to do is to understand that by deviating or by taking some risks, uh, getting some slightly different experiences, even if it goes against the common wisdom at that time, can
Yeah.
actually be really beneficial in the future, because you have a better worldview, you have a better
Yes.
network, you have better skills. But at the same time, let's say you were growing up in the world around you today. Do you think that people would still call you crazy, call you crazy, or would it be different today?
Probably still. But maybe in a different way, right? I think today there are different ways of making the world your own, but it's much more globally integrated. The standards on a lot of things have become much higher. I mean, I remember graduating high school, doing my final paper. I think that was the first time I actually wrote something longer than an email on a computer. So it's interesting how some of these things change. Let's say at the user level, but I think at the fundamental level, some of these topics around experiences, around resilience, around trying out different selves are still the same today. And if anything, opportunities for most people are more accessible through the internet, through international travel, through all kinds of if you just look at the the increase in English proficiency that comes from Netflix. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a side effect of a global media company that no one would have predicted. But it's useful and it works, and it's something that combines enjoyment with learning, clearly, because English scores are getting better in many countries for no other predictable reason.
So let's look at this. I want to stay focused on this one thing around school, high school, university, job. What I find, Christian, is this is likely to change, but it's not something that's going to change immediately. But once it does, it probably will be an irreversible change. So how, when I look at the parents, when I look at majority of the young people, everybody's still thinking I'll be in school, then I will go to university, then I'll get a job. How do you see this changing? And do you think it's still the trajectory, or there are other options?
I think there are already a lot of other options. In a lot of countries in the Western world, the majority of university students are already non-traditional students. What does that mean? They're not between 18 to 22. They're older. They already have a career, so they might be studying part-time. They might have a family and study part-time. They might look for hybrid or online options. So all of this already exists. I think, and that's just one example, right? So I think what the education system in many places pretends is that it's still 1980. And it's clearly not. And a lot of people are already consuming these new options for getting education, for getting upskilled. I had a discussion with a friend the other day. Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist from Silicon Valley, has this famous challenge where he gives young people $100,000 to not go to university. And everyone said, oh my God, this is so crazy. He's going to ruin their future. So in this case, young people who are very entrepreneurial. If you look at challenger universities around the world, a lot of them work quite well, but also because they have a very high rate of applications, and then they can pick the top 1%. And then they do something interesting, right? They have a global experience. They have an experience with a lot of work during their studies. Then a traditional university where you sit in a big lecture hall. And so I think there is a lot of variety already out there. The the old system is still fighting back. If you
Of
believe in,
course.
change theory and Thomas Kuhn and the structure of scientific revolutions and so on. But you see just from the amount of new options out there that there's clearly something changing. And by the way, COVID helped a lot. Online education is much more accepted and acceptable than before. And not only that, but also, of course, the quality has increased. The technological opportunities have increased. And so, I think it's much easier to get a better education today, but it's also much easier to get introduced to all kinds of tools to make sense of the world in a way that maybe previously you couldn't do. And that was a an opportunity for the 0.1% who were really really nerdy coders before. And today, a high schooler can build a mobile app, which is, I think, pretty cool without having the big technological background.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we've seen in the last 3 years alone the number of young people who have used these low and no code tools to develop genuinely high impact prototypes. It really is democratizing technical innovation at the
Yeah.
ground level. So, given that there is much more optionality, given that the boundaries between school and a traditional university, or whether you do that or you do something else, is starting to become a little blurry. If I think about where I grew up in India, and large part of the population still is thinking, how do I educate my child? But they're thinking traditionally. They're thinking, my child should go to a school, and then I hope he or she goes to university. I draw parallels between at some point everybody was hoping that, oh, I have a telephone in my house, a landline, until the mobile phones came along.
Yeah.
Right? How can we use this change to leapfrog skill development equitably?
Yeah. I think I'd come back to something I said earlier, which is you need to create opportunities to be exposed, to catch the bug, to normalize non-traditional ways of learning and developing. And that doesn't mean you don't go to university anymore. But that means that you are taking a lot more personal agency to develop your career path. Right. So I have a friend here in Berlin who's a tax advisor, but he just opened up his new company, and he's like, Christiane, for the next 3 months, I'm not taking any new clients. For the next 3 months, I'm building my tech stack. I was like, wow, that's really cool. So you have a bunch of tools out there that are, not books and legal text and so on, but things that you actually think are going to help you do a better job, serve your clients better. And I know you're not necessarily a tech person, but you're building this job into something that you'll enjoy doing. Right. And you can make the same argument for people who go into accounting or into finance and so on, which, in many cases you can do them in a very traditional way, but you can also do them in a much more creative way, in a more tech enabled way. And I think this is something that those are stories that need to be told more, so that then the parents, the community understand that, someone can learn how to program no code by just watching a few YouTube videos, and then starts to make money or benefit their community in another way, or create more connectivity, or better educate the next generation. That is also worth something. I understand that in many parts of the world, having a degree is still extremely important, and I expect that will remain for the foreseeable future. But again, it's the way how you play with the fringes of these developments that I think will make life extremely interesting for people.
This episode is brought to you by Lumi.network. We're on a mission to help the next generation get ready to take on the world. Our AI augmented platform runs quests that help 10 to 25-year-olds shape their future by developing AI, entrepreneurship, and design thinking skills to solve the most pressing business and social issues. If you or your organization wants to positively impact the next generation, we'd love to talk to you. To learn more, visit Lumi.network.
So let's move into the present. You are someone who has done work on youth empowerment. You worked on skill development. You worked in tech. You worked on sustainability issues. You worked on women's empowerment as well. Talk to me about the various things that you're doing that would be interesting to our listeners in any of these areas.
So I have a few hats on. I started my career as in academia, uh, which still informs a lot of what I do. This was heavily focused on economics as well as education. So I have a lot of background in human capital development in the broadest sense. So I still do a lot of work in education. I'm advising a foundation in Saudi Arabia on youth development, including, let's say, building tech skills. Right. So, for example, during COVID, we had an initiative that was fully online to give basic tech skills to about 120,000 young Saudis. And it was very engaging. It was an offering that came, at the right time during COVID, and also very empowering because we were able to reach students that would usually not come to one of the big cities to participate in some of our programs. So that for me is a very important thing to contribute to youth development. I sit on the board of a university in the United Arab Emirates. But over the last years, I've also gotten involved a lot in, let's say, startup communities of different sorts, both as an entrepreneur myself, as an angel investor, but also just as a mentor to a lot of mostly younger entrepreneurs. And I really, really like to, get into these sectors, try to understand what they're about, and give them my perspective, my views from having been in the same and in other industries for a while. And at the same time, I would have to say, because over the last decade or so, I've done a lot of work, as a self-employed person, as a freelancer. I've always heavily invested in myself. Both, at some point in about 5 years ago, I decided I want to become an executive coach. I've done that. It's not my main profession, but it's a very useful tool for the toolbox. I've done a lot of training and development, mentoring as well, but also more technical skills. So this year I've spent a few weeks doing courses on how to become a better angel investor or how to become a better fund manager. So these things I find really, really interesting. And then, in some ways they just come together in a beautiful way. And lead to a new project or to a new connection or to a speaking opportunity or an advisory opportunity. So after doing them for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, they usually find a way to seamlessly integrate into what I would consider as my day job.
Yeah, it's just entrepreneurial at various different levels, right? So you're constantly exploring new avenues. You built enough credibility and skills so that you could, things started to converge at some point. I
Yes.
understand that. I mean, I've done slightly similar things, but I find that, when I'm building this venture Lumi, just about everything that I've done in my life, actually as a student onwards, is now becoming relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Every single learning is coming into play. Every single person I got to know is
Yes.
has a role to play in this,
Yeah.
and that gives me a lot of joy. Right? Why did you end up choosing the Middle East as a region where you wanted to get more involved? For someone from Germany, that feels unusual.
Beautiful randomness and serendipity. I had an
Yeah.
opportunity as a management consultant back then. I was with Boston Consulting Group. They offered a 1-year exchange program to Dubai, where they had opened a new office. That was right after the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. Uh, Doing anything in the German economy felt a little bit depressive.
Yeah, probably.
And so, yeah, I spent a year in Dubai and kind of never left the region again. And I would say I've been very, you know, lucky to see part of the development of this region. Living in the Emirates, living in Qatar, working a lot in Saudi about for the last 6-7 years, and seeing countries and societies transition very very quickly is very interesting, but then also work-wise very fulfilling, because what is important for the region is that, and shared by basically all the countries, is that they have a young share of young citizens who want to have opportunities, need to be educated well and trained well to be able to capture these opportunities, and let's say will run the countries at a much younger age than we noticed from Europe. And in the Middle East, you have a lot of very young leadership who are very relatable, and who by and large put a lot of emphasis on building sustainable futures when it comes to education and career paths.
So I'm conscious of the time, and I want to now jump into the future. Now, you said that building sustainable future. So I look at the rise of artificial intelligence, and at the same time, big global problems like climate change. Yeah, to name just one. Um, how do you see the intersection of these two in terms of exposing young people to both of these issues fairly and early?
I would come back to the topic of agency. So, I think for many, many years, people used to say, "Oh, we need more people who can code, and we need more people who are on the engineering side of the IT revolution, and so on and so on." And it turns out now, in the last 5 years, coming back to no code and things like this, yes, you need some people who can code really well, but you also need a lot of people who can problem solve really well. And then find a way how to ask good questions, and then, plug the right no code modules together to build an app or a software and so on. And I think the same for me applies on the whole topic of AI, and probably also on the topic of sustainability. So it's not the question of, do I understand in detail how a large language model works? I think, on a bunch of basics, we should understand what makes it work well, right? So
Yeah.
topics like, garbage in, garbage out, It makes a difference of whether my large language model has read the Library of Congress or, two comic books, or, something that is politically charged, right? Then I will get very different answers. So I think the point there is to, be able to ask good questions, to understand the limitations of systems like AI, but also obviously to use it to the maximum impact possible, to, accelerate the personal development, the development of the organizations they're part of, improving their lives. And I think that's, for me, that's also the connection to sustainability. In a lot of places, sustainability is looked at as something that will lead to heavy regulation and to people being able to do less, and people being forbidden to do certain things. Usually things that are fun, right? Flying, flying to far away destinations, eating your favorite foods, and so on. But the point is, how do you think of this in a structured way? How do you create personal agency? How do you create accountability? And how, again, then coming back to the community aspect of people around you who make sure that you're living up to your potential, that you're really able to make the change with the tools that you have, and who encourage you to do better. Those are opportunities that I think today's youth will have, with all the new technologies that are coming up.
That's so great. And just to kind of end our conversation, what is your wildest prediction about how AI might play out for our society?
I don't think it's particularly wild, but I think the part that that I foresee happening is that the integration of technology into our lives will be so smooth and seamless, including at the biological and neurological level, that it will be imperceptible that we're still using AI. So that, for me, I think in a few years from now, I won't need this iPhone anymore, right? It will be connected with me in some way that probably I can't imagine right now. But it will also help me do things much better. It will help me to hopefully enjoy life more, to be productive or not productive when I choose to be. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for humans not to be ruled by AI, but to co-create and to augment the lives they're leading, in a way that we probably can't even imagine today.
That's so true. And I think I would go back to end to the point you make that it's garbage in, garbage out. So artificial intelligence is feeding off how we treat it, how we work with it. And therefore, if we can develop the skill in young people to ask good questions, to solve either their very simple problems, where problems in academics, problems in life, or just to have fun, I think then they're training the models to be their companion, to help them move ahead and to help society move ahead. But if we don't teach that skill, then I think what will happen is that there's a chance that takes over in a way that we probably don't like in the future. So it's been a pleasure, Christiana, to talk to you. I think this conversation can go into multiple episodes. Knowing you a little bit, I think I might do that to bring out one specific aspect of that, whether it's on the innovation side with young people, whether it's women's empowerment. But thank you so much for at least bringing some of these experiences out, sharing your life's journey and why it has been so beneficial to you to step out of your comfort zone. And all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a story or someone you know does, please recommend them to us by email at hello@lumi.network. We'll see you next time on In Youth We Trust.